Applying to med school is, I mean, it has always been difficult, but it's getting even more competitive than it's ever been. So last year, I mean, we hit an all-time high with pretty much 30,000 people applying to medical school last year, with about 9,500 places. Now, for grads, it's even more competitive. You have about 10,000 people every year applying to 850 places, 850 grad places. So it is really tricky. And really what you want to do is, now that we're entering this time of year where maybe if you're at school or at university, it's it's stopped for a bit. You've got a winter break. And if you haven't started preparing your med school application already, this is the time of year that you really need to be thinking about it. And it's a good time of year because, of course, everybody is kind of setting New Year's resolutions, and I don't know. I always find I get a burst of energy at the start of the year to really focus in on my goals and start working really hard towards them. But so last year we had, after the pandemic, we had a slight dip in the numbers of people applying to med school. So we had about 27,000, but we still have a lot of people who are reapplying. So we have about 5,000 people who applied the year before, didn't get in, obviously, or maybe got a place to somewhere that they didn't want to go, and then submitted another application the following year. So we're talking about anything from about a fifth to a sixth of people who are applying, who are reapplying to medicine. So it's quite common for a lot of people we get on our course to come to us after 2 or 3 failed attempts, and then they come for our help, and we show them what I'm about, a lot more depth of what I'm about to show you now, for really optimizing their application. And then that's the thing that finally gets them in. So, right. So we've talked about the question. So, MasterChef, so you're probably wondering why the hell I've got a MasterChef slide here, and it's not an error because at one point so when I wrote this presentation, actually, so obviously the information that I'm going to tell you is up to date, but when I wrote this back in March of 2021, it was the height, well, not the height of lockdown, but it was the third lockdown probably by then, and I was watching a lot of MasterChef, and I realized that actually the med school application is very similar to the challenges that people face when they're cooking a really delicious meal, because you have a few things that you have to consider, and I'm going to show you how these relate, obviously. But just to kind of give an analogy for it, you have the ingredients that make up the application. So these are things like your work experience, and I'll break these down in a moment. But your work experience, your academic achievements, your extracurriculars, all the things that make you a good candidate for medicine. These are the ingredients. Then it's all about how you present them. So these are things like your interview, your personal statement, how you present your abilities by succeeding in the aptitude test. So that is the UCAT, BMAT, and GAMSAT, which you'll maybe sit a number of those. You might sit one, maybe it's very rare that people sit all three, but you might sit 2 of those exams. So it's all about how you prepare for those as well, right? So you need to really make sure that you get the best out of it. So we talk about, so for those who've just joined, I'm just giving an analogy for the med school application to how you prepare a delicious meal. So, with the preparation is so important because you can get 2 people who get given the same ingredients, and somebody might chop, let's say, I don't know, onions really beautifully or peppers really beautifully, and another person might make them look hideous, and you have the same ingredients for the same person that doesn't give them the best chance of putting them in their best light. Then the presentation, like I say, is how you present, how you put that across in the way that you submit your application. And ultimately, it's really important who we serve it to. So I'll talk about medical school selection, because you might have really good, you might be really strong in certain elements, and that will suit certain universities. They like to see people with a good UCAT score, or some universities are not so bothered about the UCAT score, and they want to see people with good work experience. And so it's the analogy for that is kind of, you could make the most delicious steak in the world, and if you serve it to a vegan, then it's just not, it's not going to land very well. And it's exactly the same here. You might have a really, and like I say, a lot of the time, when people come to us who have failed in previous attempts to get into med school, and then they come to us to help them and to put them through our program to help this year be the one that is a success, we realize that a lot of the time they're not doing the preparation bit right, and then they're also with what they do have to work with, they're not putting that towards the right universities, and that's a really important part as well. Okay, so let's talk about some of these in turn. So, right, let me see. So let me just for a little bit of interaction, let's say in the chat, let's say what percentage of the application you think grades matter for. So if out of 100, if I was to tell you that grades are a certain amount, what would you say percentage wise grades matter for? How much do they contribute? 70%? Any other suggestions? 70 to 80%? 85%? So we're thinking that around 70 to 85. So the application is about 70 to 85% of of your contribution towards your med school application. So it's very interesting people say that, because you need to reach the cutoff. Of course, you need to have certain level of academics, but actually, once you have those academics, it only counts for about 20 to 25% of the application. And that's because being a doctor is about being well-rounded. They don't just want people who have the best grades. Otherwise, they would just choose the people who get the best A levels and best GCSEs or highest level degree, and that would be it. It's really important to be well-rounded, and what I'm showing you here with these ingredients, so to speak, is that they want to see a bit of everything. So I'd say really these all count for a different percentage, and they're all roughly, it depends on the university, but they're all about in that 20% mark. So your personal statement, so it depends, like I say, it depends on the university. For some people, the personal statement is really important. For some people, they don't even look at it. Maybe they'll look at it at interview, but sometimes they don't look at it at all. Your UCAT, so for some universities, it really, really matters, and it's kind of the first hurdle by which they choose you. And then after that, it's for some people, it's a very small factor in the weighting of how they choose it. So it really does depend on the university, but generally, as long as you meet the eligibility criteria, then beyond that, the grades are not as important as people think. So what do they want to see in terms of what you put into a good application? So the first is the attributes, like I say. So they want to see that people meet the minimum criteria for grades. So that's usually A star for most medicine courses for students applying as an undergraduate straight out of sixth form. Then you have people. Then for GCSEs, you have different universities that weight them differently. And I will, in fact, let me pop so if you want a really good source of information, my YouTube channel, I literally take any one of these ingredients and I'll do, a 10-minute video on how to get the most out of those and how to think about them. So for example, with grades, I'll give you all the universities that if you've got really high GCSEs, you should think about these. If you've got medium GCSEs, think about these. If you've got lower GCSEs, these are the universities that don't worry so much about them. Other things that they want to see are personal traits. So they want to see that you are the right kind of person that will make a good doctor. Now, I'll come on to talk about that in a minute. Then they want to see that you've got good work experience. So with work experience, I'm going to talk about all of these in more depth in a moment. They want to know that you understand medicine and what you're getting yourself into. Like I say, we have the UCAT and the BMAT. they recently announced that the BMAT after 2024 will be phased out. So there are only probably going to be about 4 more sittings of the BMAT before they choose something else. And universities haven't said exactly what they're doing yet, but they may well just adopt the UCAT, or they might come up with their own exam. And then finally, extracurriculars. So they want to see you have standout achievements. They want to see that you've done something academic and really done stuff to help yourself, to make yourself stand out. So, so before I talk about the preparation, does anyone have any questions at this stage? As a let's see, as a kind of temperature check, how are people getting on with work experience? Are people having difficulty getting work experience, or say yes or no for in the chat for difficulty getting work experience? So Tanisha's not having difficulty. Anybody else? Okay. So you guys who've all put no, you're not having difficulty with work experience. So, okay, so it seems like everybody is doing okay with that. So when we think about work experience, there are 3 elements to it. There's your shadowing, there's your paid work, and there's volunteering. Now, shadowing, I've just released a video on my YouTube channel exactly about all of these and what they're trying to achieve. But shadowing is really important that you do something in the region of about 80 hours to within, I would say ideally within the year prior to submitting your application, because you want it recent enough so that you've got something to talk about. And really the aim that you're trying to get across with this is to show that you understand what the profession is, and that you are going in knowing exactly what you're going to be doing as a doctor. You can imagine it's very difficult to understand what life as a doctor is going to be like, but at least the best thing that you can do to get an idea of that and going in with your eyes open to the profession is to go in and see what a doctor does day to day and understand what their day is like, what the challenges are. A big thing that they want to see is that you understand the realities of medicine, that it's not all, like Grey's Anatomy, and it's not just all smiles and rainbows. It's actually a really difficult job at times, and to understand that you've got the gumption to be able to go through that and you know what you're getting yourself in for. Paid work is more, because this is more for the undergraduate applicants. Paid work is just something to demonstrate responsibility, because the other two work experience methods, if you will, or avenues, they don't require you to be there. Shadowing, you're just a fly on the wall. Volunteering, you kind of go to help out a little bit, which I'll talk about in a minute. But paid work is the only one of those where someone's relying on you to be there, and they're putting a lot of trust in you via a variety of methods. So they might trust you with the keys to go in to look after their shop. They might trust you with money if you're handling it, if you're working in a shop. So, various things that they want to see to make sure, to just demonstrate that you're the kind of person that can be trusted with more responsibility later on in life of being a doctor. Excuse me, I'm just recovering from a cold, so I'm a little bit nasal. So the other thing is volunteering. Now, volunteering, what you want to get across here is that you're self-sacrificing, and that you are the kind of person that gives back to the community. And it's a great way to demonstrate your ability to care for others. Whether that is simply just going in, it depends what level you're at as to what you're allowed to do. If you're under 18, it's a bit different. But even if you're going into a local care home, and you can either be caring for people if you're old enough to, or you can simply just go in and speak to the residents and play chess with them and volunteer your time to help them. Because all of those things just show that you're self-sacrificing and are willing to give back. So work experience, there are a few there are a few things about work experience that in each of these I've kind of given you what I would say is the best method, the best type of work experience for each of these. So what I'm going to do now is pop in the chat a video that I made. It's kind of like a comprehensive guide to work experience, which is on my YouTube channel. And that will tell you for each element what exactly it is you need to do and the best type of work experience that you can get for those. So that's a really, really useful video to kind of help you understand for each of those sections what boxes you need to tick, but also the best way to do it, the easiest way to do that. So then they want to see that you read about the career, so you reading journals or articles, or maybe New Scientist or something like that, so you're keeping up to date, that you're studying hard to get the grades that you need, that you're doing preparing for the aptitude tests. The UCAT and the VMAT and the GAMSAT are going to be some of the hardest things that you do. And then hobbies and achievements. So basically just anything that develops the traits that they want to see that make a good doctor. So the presentation is then how you put that across to people. So like I say, you can have all of these things, but if you don't write the personal statement in a type of way that's going to impress people, or you don't interview well and show, interview and your personal statement, your chance to showcase the skills that you've developed. So that's really important. So really good to kind of put those across in the best way possible. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then finally, who we serve it to. So this is all about university selection. So I'm going to put another video in the chat here. And let's see, so university selection. So choosing, let's see. Does anyone have any questions while I'm finding that video for you? Okay, I found it. Perfect. So for grad and undergrad, here's a video that I would recommend. Just to get a flavor for who we've got here. If you're applying to grad, just put grad, and if you're applying to undergrad, put UG in the in the chat. So we've got grad, undergrad. Okay, cool. So we've got a mix of both. Does resetting GCSEs disadvantage your application? So it depends on the university. What is usually best is to speak to the universities themselves. Usually a lot of them don't mind, but it's important to just double check that. It's some of them, it's more often if you're resitting A levels that makes a difference. If you're resitting some of your GCSEs, they just want to see that you've achieved them. So yeah, that's the main thing I would say. But with any questions like that, it's always good to check with the university, just because it's good to have a dialogue with them and just lay your cards on the table and say, look, here's where I'm at, here's my application at the moment. And yeah, essentially just tell them, as I am I eligible? Because the first stage that you need to think about with your application is meeting the eligibility criteria, because if you don't meet the eligibility criteria, that's the first hurdle. The first thing they will do is this person eligible for our university when you apply? And then it will literally be yes or no. If it's a no, it goes straight in the bin and nobody looks at the application. If it's a yes, then you move on to the next hurdle, and that could be, what's their UCAT score? If the UCAT score is, like, for example, Newcastle, if you're a grad, they pretty much want a 2,920. And so for them, the system will go, do they meet the eligibility criteria? Tick. Okay. Did they get the UCAT cutoff? Tick. And then they'll read your personal statement, look at your application. Shall we invite this person to interview? Yes, no. Interview, did they do well? Yes, no. Should we offer them a place? Yes, no. And then it might even be, should we offer them a conditional place? Yes, we'll offer them a place. You can come and join us as long as you get a 2-1 in your degree. And then if you get that 2-1, then you can then they'll offer you the place. So it is a series of checks, and you have to make sure that you get through each one. So eligibility is the one that and then things like UCAT and academics, like a degree level or your A levels or whatever. Those are things that you can know ahead of time. So that's how you can be smart. And that video that I've just posted, that's how you will be smart about where you apply to. But I mean, there's a lot to it. It's very complicated. So on our program, when we do this, I would say this is arguably one of the most important elements. So the most important elements for us when we teach people on our one-on-one program, and, you've got to bear in mind that for grads, it's a 34 applicants to one place competition ratio. And we turn those odds into way, way more favorable, and we get, loads of grads in every year, because we take the elements that are the most important and make sure that we optimize all of them. So they are the right preparation in terms of really good work experience and just generally good achievements, doing really well in the application, in the aptitude tests, whether that be GAMSAT, UCAT, BMAT, or maybe a combination of those. Then presenting the application really well in terms of a good, solid personal statement, etc., etc. But then choosing the right medical schools, that's really one of the most important things. So all of those count for nothing if you don't put it in front of the right med schools. And to my point that I was making a minute ago, we will sit down for hours with our students, dissecting every single thing about their individual application and which universities suit their specific set of criteria. So it's a really in-depth process. That's why getting help with this sort of thing and putting a lot of time and effort into it is the thing that will make the difference between being one of the 33 out of 34 that don't get a place and being that 1 in 34 that do get that. And it's similar for undergrads. It's, like I say, it's getting more and more competitive. So okay, so yeah, so who we serve it to, where we apply is really, really important. Okay, so let's move on. So that's where I was talking about tactical application. So just being really clever about understanding the universities, understanding what our strengths are, and matching those two up, basically. So one of the things they want to see is the attributes. We talked about that. So grades we've discussed, but traits, they want to see that you're the kind of person that will make a good doctor. So the GMC, the General Medical Council, the people that govern the doctors and set the standards and investigate any complaints, and they're the body that regulate medicine in the UK, or regulate doctors, should I say, in the UK. So they put out a really important guide, which I would recommend that you read, called Good Medical Practice. Now, with that, it states the kind of people that they want to see that will make a good doctor. So they want to see that people are trustworthy, honest, reliable. They want to see that people have good communication skills. And in there, they will outline all the guidance for what kind of people they want to see to make a good doctor. Now, the universities that you apply to, they will have those traits, the ones that they kind of take from there. They will have the traits that they find most important and list them on their website. So when you're thinking about what universities you want to apply to, and you're writing your personal statement, say, you want to show that you've developed those traits, the ones that they particularly look for on the website. Because when people do, the universities that do look at personal statements, for example, that do the ones that they all interview, at interview, they will kind of have a tick list for things like, do they show the capacity to show empathy? Do they demonstrate good communication skills. So they show teamwork and leadership, and they want to see those in their application. So in their kind of criteria for whether this application is worthy to progress to the next level. So exposure is really important. So anyone who's just messaging me in the chat, just give me a moment, and I'll come to some questions at the end. So exposure. So what's really important is gaining exposure to the it's gaining exposure to the profession. So you want to you really want to get as much understanding of what life as a doctor is going to be like as possible. And by doing that, so really the more you know about medicine, the better you will perform really towards the end of your application. So when I get people on my program, I say to them, even though we're starting our preparation a year before we submit our application, which is what I recommend, we're preparing for interviews right from day one, because what happens more and more frequently in these times is that people, they will get 4 interviews and then not a single offer, because they haven't done the groundwork of what makes them a really good candidate. They just try and shortcut it by doing well in the UCAT, by writing a good personal statement, which you can do in relatively little time, and they think that that's it. And that is the biggest mistake I see people make, because then you go through the whole process and then you get to interview and they go, oh, actually this person, they might have done well in those things, but they're actually not a good candidate, so they don't get offers. And then that's really gutting for people. But what they don't realize is that what they want to see is that you're the real deal. You're somebody who understands what the profession is. You've gained exposure. You really are committed to it, and you've demonstrated that over not just the course of a couple of months, the summer before, but actually, over the course of a year or more, and really just demonstrated consistent desire and consistent action towards wanting to get into medicine. So really what you want to do is just expose yourself as much as possible. And like I say, your work experience is one of the best ways. And working in hospital, one of the best things I ever did when I was 16, I didn't know I wanted to go into medicine at 16. I took a job at the hospital serving the food on the wards to patients. And that was purely because when I was 16, that was the best paid job I could get, and it was great. But it was only from that I realized that I enjoyed being in the hospital environment. I enjoyed speaking to patients and helping them. But what it did was it gave me that real grounded knowledge in what it's like to be in hospital and what medicine is like, and understanding the environment. So I had all of this experience that when it came to interview, they asked me loads of difficult questions, and some that I could have never prepared for, but I had this real world experience of being in hospital, and I'd lived it, I'd seen it. And it's the difference between when you ask somebody a question and someone tells you a story. Have you ever had this where someone tries to pass off somebody else's story as their own, and they'll tell this story, and you ask them a question, a very simple question like, oh, what color coat were they wearing, or something like that, just a really very mundane question, and they struggle to answer because you can tell that they're basically BSing you. They're passing off the story as as somebody else. They're passing somebody else's story off as their own, and they don't actually have they haven't lived it to kind of tell you the genuine account. Whereas somebody who's who was there and they can tell you the story, they firstly can tell you better details because they know what it was like. But you ask them a question and they're like, oh yeah, it was this. And that's the difference. It's when I got to interview, I'd get asked these difficult questions, and I was just like, well, I hadn't prepared the answer to this, but because it was just like, oh yeah, actually, about 2 months ago, I remember this story and this happened and blah, blah, blah. And you can just have those things off the cuff because like I say, you've lived it and you've really put the hours in. So that's how you become the real deal. And that's how we help people as well. So the aptitude tests are really important. I would say what I'm going to do is, rather than talk in too much depth about these, I would say that the UCAT and the BMAT and the GAMSAT as well are all very important. And so I'm going to post some videos here for how I would go about preparing for these. So I've basically got a revision plan. If you go on my channel and type UCAT revision plan, BMAT revision plan, or GAMSAT revision plan, I've got a video for all of these. So I'll just post the UCAT one there. And then there's the BMAT revision plan. And these will give you a guide in terms of timings, in terms of what the exam's roughly about, but really the things that you need to do well, to score well. And I mean, this is the kind of thing that we do on our, for the students that I teach. We'll do 3 months of what was I going to say? So yeah, we'll do 3 months of seminars and mock tests and all that sort of stuff to get people ready. Because for the UCAT these days, even if you're an undergrad, I say if you want to take control of the application, you really want to be aiming for a 3,000, especially if you're a grad. I'd say we really need to aim for a 3,000 plus. For the BMAT, if you're applying to, we're training people who are applying to Oxford and Cambridge, we need to be aiming for section 1 and 2 of BMAT to get a combined score. So the maximum score for section 1 is 9. Same for section 2, also 9. And we want to aim for a combined score of 14 or over, so 2 7s basically. That's the kind of thing that we want to get for if we're applying to Oxbridge. But the other ones, you don't need quite as high a score, but still you need to be doing really well. For our grads, we're kind of aiming for at least a 60 for the GAMSAT to be in with a chance. So at this stage, let me just ask, well, in fact, let me just give you a moment to ask some questions in the chat. We've talked about a lot of things. I'm sure there are some questions that you might have. I'm just going to blow my nose a second. So, for the time of year, full of cold. Just one question I've got is, I'm here on behalf of my daughter who's in year 10 and would like to enroll for one of the programs. Yeah, good idea. We tried to do this online. Okay. So I would say that if you're in year 10, I would just, there's a webinar that I do for like the 4 key steps to a med school application. And I would say that I recommend you start by looking at that, because our program will help you kind of as you start the summer after year 11 to kind of starting year 12. That's the best time to come to the program. I think before that, it's a bit early, and all of the things that I talked to you about here, you can, because it's kind of, as you're sitting your GCSEs is probably a good time. But if some people, if they're busy with GCSEs, it can be a bit daunting. But some people are very good at managing both, so that's absolutely fine. How long should I start to prepare for UCAT? Is it early to start now? So for the UCAT, I would recommend. So you'll see in that video that there are 3 phases of application, 3 phases of preparation. The first thing is familiarization, so understanding all the questions that you need to all the types of questions that come up, and all the tactics and all the the little strategies that you can do to answer them. Now, the 2 things that you need to think about with the UCAT is accuracy, because obviously you need to get the answers right, but speed. Speed is the biggest thing that trips people up with the UCAT. Now, the UCAT is unlike any test that most people have sat. It's basically a kind of IQ test. Most people at this stage are used to having sat content-based exams, right? So your GCSEs, you go away, you learn stuff, and then they test your understanding of that stuff. Versus the UCAT, which is more like the UCAT is like I say, it's more like a performance. It's skills that they test under under pressure against the clock. So you have to do them really. You have to do these skills really, really quickly. So in terms of how long should I prepare, the three phases are: the first one is familiarization. Now get a really good resource that will teach you everything. I'd recommend practicing on a computer because the books are great, but it's very different going from a book to a computer screen. So I would say, get a resource that talks about all the question types, all the best tactics, and just shows you how to do them. Now, my video course has about, I don't know, 20 hours, maybe probably more, of all the question types and examples and practice questions, and then I talk you through them for exactly what the fastest and most accurate tactics are. So that's phase one. You can start phase one at any stage really, and start. You can kind of, because the UCAT is kind of like a load of brain teasers. So you could see the UCAT as more of a like the same way that my dad does Sudoku puzzles for fun. And if you want to do that, you can start doing them whenever you want really, and just kind of get into the rhythm of it. But then I would say so phase two is practice questions. So without untimed, because like I say, speed is really important, but it's best to just start untimed and not worry too much about your speed at that stage. Just get used to understanding the questions and getting them right. And then the final stage, phase three, is when you really crank up the intensity. So you want to then start doing it timed, and you can set the timer to quite slow and then slowly increase it to being quite fast. But I would say that's the stage where people burn out a bit if they start too soon. So really, depending on where you are, anything from 4 to 6, maybe 8 weeks max of doing that phase is when you kind of increase the intensity. I would recommend keeping, like anything, you need to measure your progress. You need to know where you're at so that you can tailor your preparation for the next bits. So I would strongly recommend that you that you do some mock tests during that time. And sorry, let me just get this. Okay, yeah, I would just strongly recommend that you do some mock tests during that time so that you can stay, so you can get a good picture of where you are with it. So that's how I would prepare for the UCAT. But again, like if you wanted to have a look at those videos, they'll give you a bit more of a robust plan. And if you want somebody to help you through it, we walk people through the entire process, and a lot of our people on our course now have got 3,000 plus, and we actually get a lot of people who they don't really prepare very well. So then in previous years they've done the test, they've got like a 2,300, 2,400, which is quite below average, and will kind of put you at risk of not meeting the eligibility criteria. And then they've come, after having that sort of score, they've come to us, and then they've gone through our program, and we've got them to 3,000 plus. So it's very doable. And there are a couple of videos on there of people who've done okay, and then on my YouTube channel, of people who've done okay, and then they've gone through our program and they've got really high scores. So have a look at those if you'd like, because they'll talk about what they did differently. So other questions. So with grad medicine, is there more emphasis on shadowing compared to paid work? Yeah. So they're all important. The thing with grads is that they will all have done a wide variety of jobs at that stage. So some people might have worked full time in a really, they might be a hospital manager, or they might do something completely different, but have like a job with lots of responsibility, and just like something that shows that they're quite impressive in some way. Now, shadowing. So a good guide to use for shadowing is the Warwick Guide. They have very strict guidelines on how much work experience they want, how recently it has to have been, how many hours you have to have spent, what type of environment is accepted, what kind of evidence they want for it. So I would use that as a guide, because it really is it really is a great reference to make sure that you're okay for pretty much any university. And yeah, for grads, they're a lot more stringent with that sort of thing. What are the questions we've got? So another question is, I've been creating an article about medical records. Do you think that would have any value within my personal statement? Of course, they want to see that would come under the kind of academic side of things. So yeah, let's say you did an EPQ, or you did a research project, whatever it is, and then you did, and then you wrote an article about it. Maybe I would submit it somewhere to see if you can get it published. We actually have our own journal that you could submit it to and see if we'll publish it there. And then at least you can say like, oh, I got it published in a local journal or something like that. Okay, cool. So I think we're up to date with all the questions. Let's carry on with the presentation. Okay, so extracurricular and further reading. So further reading is just great for showing that you've got an interest in the career, in certain subjects. As I said, you want to show that you're up to date with the health news. So BBC Health is brilliant. Then you've got the student BMJ. If you're a grad and if you're a current student, you're able to submit articles to this. Eduardo was asking about, where he can submit what he can do with his articles that he's writing. This is a brilliant place if you're a grad and you want to get something published, because saying that you're a published author, even if it's in the student BMJ at your stage, is a fantastic way to stand out. Then New Scientist, Nature, all of these magazines are really good just to demonstrate your interest. Extracurriculars are more towards showing developing traits. So you can imagine if you play in a football or basketball team, you demonstrate a lot of teamwork, and if you are the captain of that team, you demonstrate leadership. Languages, for example, medicine, you learn about 30,000 new words when you undertake a degree in medicine. So it's like learning a new language. So if you can demonstrate that you can pick up languages, it's another kind of transferable skill. And then even if you're doing things like learning to read music, or just generally playing music, dedication to something, commitment to something over a long period, these are the sort of things that they want to see, that you've got that stickability that will make you a good doctor. So then we talk about personal statement interview. Obviously, we're talking about this is how we present all of those things. Now, your personal statement varies in importance, as I said. Some universities, it is incredibly important, and so for example, King's, your experience and how you put that across in your personal statement will be a big factor as to whether they invite you to interview. Whereas there are some universities that literally, they don't even look at it. So it can be frustrating, but it's still an important part of the application that you need to make sure that you're writing a good one, even if they just use it at interview, because you don't want to say something silly that sets the tone for your interview, because they might they might pull you up on it. You might have said something that sounds a bit fishy. If you embellish stuff that, they have a lot of experience with people. When I interview and when I sit on the panel interviews, on the interview panel, sorry, you can see if something just looks a bit too good to be true, and you get a bit suspicious, and you start digging a little bit, and then you can uncover stuff. That doesn't mean to say that it's always a porky pie, but it can, make sure that you write stuff that you're willing to talk about, you can hold a good conversation about, and you can have an intelligent discussion about. So yeah, it's personal statement, and there are ways to structure your personal statement. On my program, we advise dividing it into sixths, and you do 3 sixths based. So it's a very set way to do it. So you start with a really strong introduction as to why you want to study medicine, and you finish with a strong summary of what you talk about, and again reiterate why medicine. So those are the why medicine. Then about 3/6, so in the middle part of it, you talk about your work experience and your exposure to medicine, your further reading, and then on the penultimate sixth, and extracurriculars, you can kind of have anything from a sixth to 25%, and you just talk about all the things that you've done that develop traits that make you a great person that's suitable to become a doctor. Excuse me, I'm coughing a lot today. Okay, and then your interviews are really, really important. I think interviews are possibly the most underestimated part of the entire application. Medicine, sorry, the way medicine is going, every year I'm getting more and more people who come to me for help because they thought they were fine. They did it all alone, and then they got to interviews. They got 4 interviews, and not one of them offered a place. Now that's down to a few things. It's down to the interview technique itself, but it's also down to, remember what I said at the start, that your preparation for interviews starts right, a year before you even submit your application. It's all about everything that you do, all the seeds that you plant a year, 2 years before the interview, then they will come to fruition by the time you sit your interview. So many people come to me for help because they're reapplying because last year they got 4 interviews and no offers. And then we look at it, and it's because they didn't do the early stages well. So if you, like I say, if you try and shortcut it, if you try and blag it, if you try and just do like, oh, okay, a good UCAT score and blah, 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 you'll get to interview, but you won't get past interview. So it's all about putting in the right kind of work early on. And interviews, if you prepare well, they can be really fun because that's the bit where you get to show off how hardworking you are, how much effort you've put into it over the last few years, and just really humbly show them why you're the kind of person that they will want to have at their medical school. So yeah, so tactics are really important, and there are loads. This is what I spend half of my time with my students doing, is like having the best tactics to help people get in, because applying to medical school is just a game, and all you have to do is make sure that you play the game as well as possible. And if you play the perfect game, then you will get there. And a lot of the time, it's just as simple as having the right information, having the right guidance. And this is why, I'm really passionate about helping people on our program, because the more the more information you have, and the more tactical and the more you understand everything, the better your chances. And it's just about understanding the areas that you need to work on and spend the right amount of time on to make your application strong, but also playing to your strengths and choosing things that are going to give you, in your particular circumstance, the best chance of success. So just while I do that, does anybody have any questions that they want to ask? I'm just going to blow my nose again but if anyone wants to pop some questions in the chat, I would love to hear a bit more from you. No questions? Anybody at all? If you want to unmute, you can do that as well. So okay, cool. Well, now's your time to ask. So if you guys want, we have this time of year, we kind of have a couple of places available on our um, on our one-on-one program. So we have a program where we help people on an individual basis, and it's the idea is that we guide you through the entire application process, and we've had really good success with it ever since we launched. And it's just there to have somebody guide you through every stage. So whatever you're struggling with, whether it's getting work experience, whether it's preparing for the UCAT, choosing your med schools, writing your personal statement, getting your interview ready, the program is designed to really take people through the entire journey to give them the best chance of succeeding. And we've, like I say, we've had really, really good success with it. And we take a lot of people who have had 2 or 3 failed attempts and not got in, and then they go through our program and they understand what it takes and what kind of thing they should be doing to give them the best chance of getting in. And it's application only. We've got a couple of, like I say, we've got a couple of places available at the moment. And if you like, I can pop the website for where to apply. Oh, sorry, let me just get that on the right page. So for where to apply in the chat. And actually, in a moment, we've got, we'll have Umar joining us, he actually went through the program last year, and he's just started his first year at UCL. So he came to us and was a bit, unsure about how to do well in his application, and he managed to get places at, I think actually he might be at Imperial. He basically wanted to go to one of the London universities, and he got offers from all of them. But at the start, he just really didn't have a clue as to how to increase his chances. So yeah, he'll be a really good person to talk to, because you will be able to ask him questions, and he's kind of been through, he's walked a mile in your shoes already, or done the thing that you're trying to do. So he'll be here in a moment, and I'll get him to tell you a little bit about his experience on the course. Oh, talk of the devil. Does anybody have any questions for me in the chat? Nobody at all? Okay. Well, excuse me. Well, right on cue. So as I was saying, last year, Umar came to us around this time of year, and he had high hopes and high ambitions of getting into some of the really competitive medical schools. So I'm actually going to, Satya, I'll answer your question in a second, but I'll, well, firstly, welcome Umar. It's the first time I've seen him properly since he started at medical school. So firstly, Umar, how are things going?
Hi Ash, it's a pleasure to be here today. Yeah, things
It's a
going
pleasure to
great.
have you.
Just finished first term at university this year.
Yeah. Remind me, I can't remember where you decided in the end. Did you go for Imperial or UCL?
I went for UCL in the end. Yeah.
UCL, great. And so tell me, how are things going? How's your first term gone?
Well, I can't lie, it was quite a lot of work the first term. Like it was more than I expected. Like in the first week or so, they'd say they ease things in, but then literally timetable's been jam packed as soon as you go in. It's just sixth form all over again. But the university's been really supportive, and one thing I really like is that they specifically timetable in areas where you have freedom to do what you want. So, for example, Wednesday afternoons, Friday afternoons, like all programs are not allowed to schedule any lectures in during then. Same as you can just go to any like clubs or anything you want, societies you want to join. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, I remember the shock of starting medical school. It's like it's a step up going from GCSE to A level, but it's a whole nother step up going
Yeah,
to it's a bit of a shock to the system. You'll rest well this winter break.
hope so.
So yeah, so I was just telling them a little bit about the program. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience and kind of where you started, and then how your time with FutureDoc went?
Definitely, yeah. So as Ash said, my name's Umar, first year medical student at UCL, and I actually joined FutureDoc. It was actually 2 years ago. I was checking my emails 2 years ago yesterday. I'm not even joking, 2 years ago. Now, a bit
Wow.
about how I joined. I've got a really lovely mum, and she was always on it looking for, because she knew I'd be applying to medicine. And I was the first person in my family to go to university. I didn't know any doctors. Obviously, it was all during COVID as well, so it was really hard to find work experience. So she was always online looking for things for me to join. And then she came across your channel on YouTube, and she was like, "Mom, we got to sign up to this." I'm like, "Okay, I'll have a look." And 2 years ago, yesterday was actually the first email I received. And literally, for the moment I joined, I knew this was the perfect thing for me. Now, when I first joined FutureDoc, it was 2 years ago yesterday. But literally, from the moment I had my first meeting, I knew it'd be tailored directly towards me. And when I joined, I told Ash which university I'd be aspiring to, and he put me with a mentor from the university. So, for example, I wanted to apply to UCL Imperial, so I was paired with a mentor from universities, with a mentor who had experience applying to there. And I felt that every session I had, it was really tailored towards me, right? And I didn't just receive general feedback; it was more exactly tailored towards me. And every session would hone on a different skill. Now, obviously, as I mentioned before, I was one of the years where we were applying during COVID. So I had the extra difficulty of, people applying from the year above who were deferring. It was really hard to get any work experience. And instead of being left in the shadows about how to get all of that, normally you're kind of like expected to get yourself, Ash pointed me the direction towards things like Medic Mentor. They've got online work experience. There's other ones online as well, around and about. And he pointed me in the direction towards them. And it was all really useful and helping me, pick out where was I lacking my application and filling in all the gaps. Another thing I really liked about FutureDoc was the accountability that was there. So Ash had a lot of number of different online courses, and as I was working my way through them, he could actually see how much each student's done, and there was that accountability of saying that. And every time we met, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, by the way, guys, I can see how much you guys are doing." And he found that I remember him saying specifically that the people who were engaging with him were course more. We were finding they were smashing through each of the checkpoint of the application process a lot harder. For example, you've got the UCAT, is a UCAT course, you've got his EMAT course, etc. And I found that every single one I went to, there were things that I took away that I couldn't just find from browsing around on YouTube and just online and stuff like Medic Portal. There's stuff on there. There's stuff from Ash's courses that you can't just get from browsing around online. I think that the thing that really helped me the most was when it came to around interview time. What makes interviews really hard is that obviously a lot of people get called to interview, but it's actually the stage where most people get knocked out, and it's really competitive at that moment. And thanks to Future, I actually managed to secure 3 interviews from Southampton, UCL, and Kings. And I remember that every single we used to call these things, I think we were called interview hotspots, right, or hot seats. I remember that every single
Yeah.
one I went to, like when it came to interview time, each interview you only asked 5 or 6 different questions, and so you got to think there's only so much they can ask you. And I felt that throughout the whole 2 years I was with FutureDoc, I'd come across one of them questions once or twice before, so it really boosted my confidence. And again, at the end, I managed to get 3 offers from Southampton, Kings, and UCL. And really, what was key in me being successful at interview was that I'd covered them questions before, whether it was with Ash, whether it was with my mentor, whether he'd got a guest speaker come in. I'd all covered them each one before. And just having knowing that you've seen it before, you know what kind of points to mention, just overall boosted my confidence. And yeah, I guess I'm here today at UCL.
Yeah, cool. And you did really well in all the hurdles, really, didn't you? You did well in the UCATs. You did really well in the BMATs. And I remember you emailing me the day after a few of the things. Like I think you said the SJT, just just watching the videos and like all of our sessions the day before really helped. And you got a really
Yes,
good
so,
UCAT
so a
score,
bit
didn't
about
you?
that with the SJT. I signed up with Medify, it's one of the common ones out there. I found that every single time I was doing a mock, I was getting band two consistently. I knew that if I really wanted to have a chance at universities like King's, and they actually factor in your band score when they're giving an interview score, I knew that I needed a band one. And I found that every single mock I was doing, I was just consistently at band two. And literally, I'm not even joking, the week before, I actually uploaded a video on top tips for SJT. And it just completely changed my perspective on how I need to handle them questions. And one of the things you need to see is think like Jesus. Obviously, the metaphor being that you need to think about how you should act, not how you actually would act. So questions on like teamwork and um, coming across members of your team and how you talk to them. It's not what you'd actually do, but it's what you're expected to do. And just having that shift in mentality, I found that was really helpful. And again, ended up getting band one. For me, that was a shock. Like I'd never got a single band one in my prep.
Great. And yeah, and you know, like I said, so outside of Oxford and Cambridge, the London universities, particularly King's, particularly UCL, are some of the hardest to get into, and it's
Definitely,
amazing. Umar got offers from both, and had to do well in both the UCAT and the BMAT to get those sorts of offers. So, and then obviously getting to interview, it's not easy either. You need to
yeah,
impress there as well, because as I said earlier in the talk, you can get to interview, but getting through interview is a different kettle of fish as well. So, it's
definitely.
really important. So, I mean, do you have any recommendation for any of these guys as they're applying? Anything that you'd recommend, some tips or your pearls of wisdom that you'd give them for increasing the chance of succeeding?
Definitely. I think one of the things that's really hard about when you're getting to interview stage, I feel like if some of you guys in year 13 around this time, you'll be starting to prepare for interviews. And I went to Reading Boys, and a lot of people, I was surrounded by people who were all applying to medical school. Like in my year group alone, there was about 30 people. But when it came to people who were getting offers, only about 50% of people managed to pass the interview. And I was asking people like, what were they using to prepare? And what stood people out, or what stood me apart from the rest, was the amount of time you're putting into interview prep. And you've got to kind of balance your time. So around this time, December time, a lot of people, or for my school especially, we had our mocks around January time. And half the year we're spending, we're like, we need to pass these mocks. But I was thinking, right, I've got to think of the long term. Yes, I do need to pass my mocks, but again, interviews are just around the corner. I need to dedicate a lot of time towards that. So I guess you've got to make that little bit of personal sacrifice and thinking, where do I need to dedicate my time the most? Because with interviews, it's not just being able to talk about how you work well in a team, leadership, all these personal insight questions, but rather they can ask you stuff about Brexit, and they can ask you stuff about COVID, they can ask you things about any constitution, they can ask you stuff about the NHS long-term plan. So there's all these different hot topics you've got to know about, and you can't just you do have to set aside time where you can browse around on the internet, go through Ash's content, and actually learn these things. And what makes interviews hard as well is that when you think of interviews, you usually think of them being in person, but the vibe you get online is a lot different. And so I do recommend having the practice where you're doing it in front of a screen, because you even record yourself. One thing I found was that when you record yourself, there's certain things you pick up from the way you speak. And I was really annoyed the first couple of times, like, I don't like the way I'm saying that. I don't like how I'm saying all the time. And so it forces you to change the way you're speaking. So yeah, definitely, if you've got interviews online, have a lot of practice where you're recording yourself, and you can take out certain things from the way you speak, and definitely set aside some time where you're working through them hot topics, because yeah, a good chunk of your interviews when you're being asked about them.
Perfect. Thank you, Umar. And yeah, exactly, exactly what Umar was saying. And you know, that the reason the program does so well is that we keep people on track. So the thing that people struggle with is knowing how to spend their time efficiently. And that's
Yeah,
exactly what we do. We understand that you've got a lot of stuff going on. You need to find ways to put this time in, but also to do it in a manner that you can spend a lot of time, of useless time or wasted time on the
yeah,
application. Whereas having somebody there supporting you one on one, they're going to tell you how much time you need to spend in which areas, so to make sure that you're maximizing the effort and not wasting it on useless things that aren't going to impact your application. So it's really good for busy people basically who need to just save time by being directed in the right way. um, cool. Well, thank you, Ma. I really appreciate you coming today and telling them about your experience. So that's really, unless anyone's got any questions, that's really it. Like I say, we've got a few places available on the program at the moment. So again, if you want to, it's application only. So you have to submit an application and then do an interview with my head of admissions to see if we can accept you onto the program. But yeah, have a look at it and feel free to apply. And we'd love to have a chat to you and see how we can help you. Um, but other than that, I think we'll wrap up there. Um, Imma, if you want to stay behind, it'd be good to have a chat with you and catch up as to
yeah.
how things are going. I'd love to hear about everything at UCL. But other than that, anyone has any questions, we can call it a day then, let you get on with it. But I'll kind of finish with just saying that the more you put time into this, the better, the stronger your application will be. The earlier you start and the more time that you put in, the stronger you will build your application. And that means first, the higher chances of getting in. And then second, the higher, so the more competitive medical schools you can go to. Umar was joined us at a very good time, and because of that, he put a lot of effort into his application, got himself to a level where it's like, okay, there's a good chance now that I can get in. So you can play with, okay, well, I'll have some safe options, but also I've got the capacity to apply for the more competitive medical schools. Umar's got offers at two of the most competitive medical schools in the UK there, and it just goes to show that if you put the time in early and you work at it, you can really get there. So yeah, now's a good time. It's coming up to the new year, as I said, where people are feeling energetic and ready to start. And I think that would be a really good time to start your med school application. If you're submitting it in September, be a really good time.